I spent my youth building skyscrapers for strangers, but when I finally bought a Victorian villa, my parents sued me. They swore under oath that the house I paid for belonged to my unemployed brother. They thought they would teach me a lesson about family duty, but instead, the judge made them burn with shame. Before I tell you how the verdict came down, ask yourself, what would you do if your family tried to steal your sanctuary? My name is Ivy Thistledown. I stood before the iron gates of the Hawthorne, and the fog of Blackwood curled around my ankles like a living thing, cold and possessive. At 29 years old, I had learned to read buildings the way other people read facial expressions. I knew that a hairline fracture in a foundation could bring down a skyscraper just as surely as a lie could collapse a marriage. As the lead architect for Sterling and Stone, I spent my days designing glass and steel monoliths for tech billionaires in the city. Structures that screamed transparency and light. But here, standing in the shadow of this decaying Victorian relic, I felt the first true pulse of belonging I had experienced in my entire life. The house was a disaster to the untrained eye. The shingles were peeling like dead skin. The porch sagged under the weight of 100 winters, and the windows were clouded with the cataracts of neglect. But to me, it was perfect. It was honest about its brokenness, unlike the family I was born into. The Hawthorne did not pretend to be whole while rotting from the inside out. My family was a structure built on a sinkhole, to the outside world. My parents, Brenda and Marcus, were the picture of suburban respectability. They attended church, they hosted neighborhood barbecues, and they spoke of family values with the pious conviction of saints. But inside, the architecture of our lives was warped. The load-bearing wall of our family was not love or mutual respect. It was the relentless, blinding adoration of my older brother, Austin. Austin was 32 years old. He was a man-child suspended in a perpetual state of adolescence, a charming parasite who had never been told no in his life. While I was studying until 3 a.m. to earn my scholarship, Austin was racking up credit card debt that my father quietly paid off. While I was climbing the ladder at Sterling and Stone, working 80-hour weeks and eating vending machine dinners, Austin was finding himself. That search usually involved online poker, impulsive trips to Vegas, and business ventures that evaporated like mist. He was the golden boy, and I was the insurance policy. I was the flying buttress designed to hold up the cathedral of his ego so it would not collapse on my parents. I adjusted the collar of my trench coat, fighting the chill. This house, this wreck on the hill, was my declaration of war. I had bought it 3 days ago. I did not use my name. I used an anonymous limited liability company. I had formed specifically for this purpose. It took every cent I had saved over the last 10 years, scraped together from bonuses, overtime, and skipped vacations. It also took the entirety of the inheritance my grandmother had left me. She was the only person in that bloodline who had ever looked at me and seen a person, not a utility. Grandma had worked at the Hawthorne 50 years ago. She was a housekeeper here. She used to tell me stories about the library with the coffered ceiling and the way the morning light hit the stained glass in the foyer. She told me it was the only place she ever felt safe. When she passed, she bypassed my father entirely and left her small savings to me, with a note that simply said, "Buy your own roof, Ivy." My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the silence. I looked at the screen. Mom. My stomach tightened. A conditioned reflex honed over 2 decades. I let it vibrate for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, taking a deep breath of the damp, pine-scented air. If I answered, I knew what was coming. It was never to ask how I was. It was never to congratulate me on the award I had won last month. It was always a transaction. I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Mom." "Ivy." "Thank God." Brenda's voice was high, pitched with that frantic edge she used whenever Austin was in trouble. It was a performance, practiced and perfected. "Where are you?" "I have been calling for 2 hours." "I am working," I lied. The lie came easily now. It was a structural reinforcement I had built to keep them out. "I am on a site visit." "What is wrong?" "It is your brother," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That landlord of his is a monster. Ivy, a complete monster. He is threatening to evict Austin just because he is 2 months behind on rent. Can you believe the cruelty? Austin has been sick. He has been too stressed to work." I stared up at the broken facade of the Hawthorne. Austin was not sick. I had seen his Instagram story 4 hours ago. He was at a club in the city, popping a bottle of champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "That is unfortunate," I said, my voice flat. "Unfortunate? Is that all you have to say?" Her tone shifted instantly from victim to aggressor. "He is your brother, Ivy, blood. He needs $3,000 by tomorrow morning or he is on the street. Your father and we are well. You know the pension check does not come until the 5th. We need you to handle this." Handle this. That was the phrase of my childhood. Ivy, handle the chores so Austin can practice his guitar. Ivy, handle your brother's homework so he does not fail. Ivy, handle the reality so we can live in the fantasy. "I can't," I said. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and shocked. "What do you mean? You can't? You are a partner at that firm now. Do not lie to me about money. Ivy, we know what architects make. I am not a partner. Mom, I am a lead associate, and I said I can't." I gripped the cold iron of the gate until my knuckles turned white. I lost a significant amount of money on a bad investment, a failed project. My accounts are frozen for an audit. I have nothing liquid right now. It was the most elaborate lie I had ever told them. In the past, I would have caved. I would have transferred the money, hating myself as I did it, just to stop the guilt, just to stop the noise. But today, standing in front of the house that Grandma used to scrub floors in, I felt something shift. The foundation of my obedience cracked. "You lost money?" Brenda sounded disgusted, not concerned. "How could you be so irresponsible? We were counting on you. Austin is counting on you. What kind of sister lets her brother sleep in a shelter?" "He can sleep on your couch," I suggested, watching a crow land on the crumbling chimney. "Don't be ridiculous. Austin needs his space. He is sensitive. Ivy, you know that." She sighed, the sound of a martyr mounting her cross. "Fine. If you are going to be useless, I will have to sell your grandmother's jewelry, the pieces she left in the safe deposit box. I hope to keep them in the family. But if you are going to be selfish—" She was bluffing. Grandma had given me the jewelry years ago, secretly, before she died. Mom just didn't know it. She was trying to sell me something I already owned to pay for a son who owned nothing but entitlement. "I am sorry, Mom. I have to go. The reception here is bad." "Ivy, wait. Only 2,000 then? Ivy?" I ended the call. My hand was shaking as I shoved the phone back into my pocket. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of severance. I had just cut a support beam, and the terrifying thing was waiting to see if the roof would fall on my head. But the sky remained clear, gray and heavy, but clear. I walked up the cracked driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. I reached into my bag and pulled out the heavy iron key the real estate agent had given me. It was cold and rough, nothing like the sleek electronic fobs I used at my apartment in the city. This key had weight. It had history. I stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under my feet, a warning sound. "Careful," it seemed to say. "This place requires work." "I know," I whispered to the empty air. "I am ready to work." I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly. Dust, old paper, damp timber, and beneath it all, the faint, sweet scent of cedar. The interior was dark, the windows boarded up by the previous owner to prevent vandalism. I clicked on the heavy flashlight I had brought with me. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a grand staircase that swept upward into the darkness. The banister was hand-carved mahogany, thick with grime but structurally sound. To my left, the living room was a cavern of shadows. The wallpaper was peeling in long, mournful strips, revealing the lath and plaster beneath. I walked to the center of the room and set my bag down on the floor. I pulled out the deed to the house. Just to look at it again, the papers were stamped and notarized. Owner, Hawthorne, LLC, it was mine. The silence here was different from the silence in my sterile apartment. That silence was lonely. This silence was expectant. It was waiting for me to strip away the rot and reveal the beauty underneath. My parents in Austin thought I was merely an extension of their will, a resource to be mined until depletion. They did not know that I was also a builder. They did not know that for the last 10 years, while they were spending my emotional currency, I was hoarding my actual currency. I had been planning my escape brick by brick. I took off my expensive trench coat and folded it neatly on a clean patch of floor. Underneath, I was wearing work overalls from my bag. I pulled out a heavy-duty scraper, a mask, and a set of gloves. I walked over to the wall nearest the fireplace. The wallpaper there was a hideous floral pattern, stained brown by years of water damage. It represented everything I hated, covering up the damage with a cheap, pretty facade. I dug the corner of the scraper into the paper. It resisted for a moment, then gave way with a satisfying trip. A long strip of paper curled down, falling to the floor like a dead snake. I took a deep breath. The air was full of dust spores, but it tasted like oxygen. I checked my watch. It was 7 in the evening. I had 5 hours before I needed to drive back to the city to maintain the illusion that I was living my normal, compliant life. 5 hours of manual labor, 5 hours of sweating, scraping, and bleeding for something that was actually mine. I thought about Austin, probably ordering another round of drinks on a tab he wouldn't pay. I thought about my father, probably sitting in his recliner, shaking his head at my selfishness. I thought about my mother, calculating who else she could manipulate to solve her problems. I swung the scraper again, harder this time. Rip, another strip fell. I was not just renovating a house, I was excavating myself. I was scraping away 29 years of expectations, 29 years of being the good daughter, 29 years of being the safety net. I worked through the night, the beam of my flashlight the only star in my personal galaxy. My arms burned, my throat itched from the dust, and my fingernails were black with grime. But as the pile of debris grew on the floor, so did the space in my chest. I was ivy thistledown. I was an architect, and for the first time in history, I was building a home that no one could take away from me, or so I thought. I did not know it then, as I stood in the dark humming a tune my grandmother used to sing. But the cracks in this house ran deeper than the plaster, and the cracks in my family were about to widen into a chasm that would threaten to swallow everything I had just bought. But that night, there was only the sound of the scraper, the rhythm of my breathing, and the intoxicating, terrifying taste of freedom. I worked until midnight, until my muscles trembled and my hands were raw. When I finally packed up to leave, I looked back at the wall I had cleared. The bare plaster was gray and scarred, but it was clean. It was ready for something new. I locked the door behind me, double-checking it. I drove away into the fog, leaving the Hawthorne standing silent on the hill, a secret fortress waiting for its queen to return. I did not know that the siege was already being planned. I did not know that my simple lie about the failed investment would trigger a chain of events that would bring the enemy to my gates. But for now, I had a key, and for a girl who had spent her life knocking on the doors of her parents' affection, holding a key was enough. The renovation became my second life, a secret existence carved out between the hours of 7 in the evening and 2 in the morning. If my day job at Sterling & Stone was about erecting monuments to corporate ego, my nights at the Hawthorne were about stripping away the facade. I became obsessed with the woodwork in the library. It was painted a suffocating, glossy white, a landlord special that covered the intricate grain of the original oak. I spent 3 nights just on one section of the wainscoting. The sound of the sander was my lullaby. It drowned out the thoughts that usually kept me awake. As the white paint turned to dust and floated in the beam of my work light, I imagined I was sanding away the layers of guilt my mother had lacquered onto my soul since birth. You are the responsible one. Ivy, scrape, Austin just needs a break. Ivy, scrape, you owe us. Ivy, scrape, underneath the paint. The wood was dark, rich, and hardened by time. It was beautiful. It had just been hidden for too long. My phone, resting on a stack of drop cloths, buzzed incessantly. It was a digital tether I could not quite bring myself to cut. I glanced at the screen. A notification from Instagram. Austin_the_king posted a new photo. I pulled off my mask and picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I knew I should not look, but it was like staring at a car crash. I tapped the notification. There he was, my brother. He was posing next to a bottle of Grey Goose vodka in what looked like a VIP booth, surrounded by people who looked bored and expensive. The caption read, "Grinding hard, big moves coming soon. Entrepreneur hustle blessings." I looked at the timestamp, posted 20 minutes ago. This was the same man who, according to my mother, was on the verge of homelessness. The same man who needed $3,000 for rent, or he would be sleeping on a park bench. The cognitive dissonance made my head spin. He wasn't grinding. He was spending the grocery money my parents had likely wired him that morning. I threw the phone back onto the drop cloth. I did not have time for his fiction. I had reality to build. 2 days later, the phone calls started. Not from Mom this time, but from Dad. Marcus Thistledown did not call for small talk. He called for enforcement. I was in the middle of tearing up the carpet in the hallway, a shag nightmare from the 70s that smelled of mildew and regret, when the ringtone echoed through the empty house. "Hello, Dad," I answered, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. "Your mother tells me you are claiming poverty," he said. No greeting. No. "How are you?" Just an accusation. His voice was deep, a rumble that used to terrify me when I was 6. Now, it just sounded tired and bitter. "I am not claiming anything," I said, wedging a crowbar under a tack strip. I told her the truth. My assets are tied up. I cannot liquidate anything right now without taking a massive penalty. "Penalties," he scoffed. "You care more about bank fees than your own flesh and blood. Austin needs a car." "Ivy," I paused. "A car? I thought he needed rent." "He sorted the rent out," Dad said quickly. Too quickly. "He is resourceful, but he needs a vehicle. He wants to drive for a rideshare app. You know, pull himself up by his bootstraps. Honest work, but he needs a decent car to qualify. We found a used sedan for $6,000. We have 2. We need you to cover the other 4. I closed my eyes. It was always a new scheme. Last year, it was a camera because he was going to be a photographer. The year before, it was a high-end laptop because he was going to learn coding. The camera was pawned. The laptop was used for online poker. "Dad, he does not have a license," I said calmly. "He lost it 2 years ago for driving under the influence. Remember?" There was a pause on the line, a silence so thick I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. "He got it back." Dad lied. I knew he was lying. I had checked the public records last week. "Look, are you going to help your brother start a career? Or are you going to hoard your money like a miser? You are ungrateful, Ivy. We sacrificed everything to put you through that fancy college. We took out loans. We worked overtime, and now you sit in your ivory tower and look down on us. I paid off those loans, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I paid them off 5 years ago. With interest. I sent you the confirmation letter." "It is not about the money," he shouted, the receiver crackling. "It is about the principle. You clearly do not care if this family sinks or swims. Fine, keep your money, but do not come crying to us when you are alone." The line went dead. I stood there in the hallway of my half-ruined house, holding a crowbar, shaking, ungrateful. The word was a weapon they kept sharp. I looked at the wall I had just exposed. The plaster was cracked, but strong. I am not alone. I thought, I have this place. I went back to work with a ferocity that frightened me. I channeled every ounce of rage into the renovation. I tore down the rot. I patched the holes, and in the process, I found something. It was in the library, the room I loved most. I was inspecting the built-in bookshelves, tapping on the backing to check for termite damage. The sound was hollow, different. I leaned in closer, shining my flashlight into the corner of the bottom shelf. The wood paneling looked slightly misaligned. I used the edge of my chisel to pry at the molding. It gave way with a groan of dry wood. Behind the panel was not insulation or studs, but a small, dark cavity, a hiding place. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached into the dusty darkness. My fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. I pulled it out. It was a tin box, the kind used for biscuits in the 1950s. The paint on the tin was faded, featuring a picture of a smiling housewife. I sat down on the floor, ignoring the sawdust, and pried the lid open. Inside were 3 leather-bound notebooks. Journals. I opened the first one. The handwriting was elegant, looped script in blue ink. The date on the first page was October 12th, 1974. The house feels restless tonight. The entry began. I can hear the wind in the chimneys. My husband thinks the money is safe in the bank, but I know better. He does not know about the account in Zurich. He does not know what I have buried in the garden. I gasped. I flipped through the pages. It was the diary of the previous owner, a woman named Margaret Vance. As I read, a picture began to form. This wasn't just a house. It was a vault of secrets. There were references to hidden assets, family betrayals, and specific details about the architectural history of the house that were not on any public record. The stained glass in the foyer. One entry read, "Is not original. It was imported from a chapel in France. It is worth more than the house itself." I looked up toward the hallway. I had almost thrown that stained glass out, thinking it was tacky reproduction. I realized then that I had bought more than a shelter. I had bought a treasure chest, and I was the only one who knew the combination, or so I thought, while I was uncovering the secrets of the hawthorn. I made a fatal error, a digital footprint I forgot to sweep. 3 months ago, before I even found the house, I had visited my parents for Thanksgiving. My father asked me to fix their computer, a clunky desktop I had bought them 5 years prior. I had logged into my personal email to download some antivirus software. I thought I had logged out. I was usually so careful. But that day, the tension in the house had been high. Austin had arrived late and drunk, and in my haste to leave, I must have only closed the browser window instead of clicking Sign Out. 4 days after my father's angry phone call, a receipt landed in my inbox. It was from the lumber yard where I had ordered the custom oak flooring for the living room. Order confirmation for ivy thistledown. Delivery address, 42 Blackwood Lane, the Hawthorne. Total, $4,200. At my parents' house, sitting in the den. Austin must have been bored. He must have sat down at the family computer to play games or check his fantasy football league. He opened the browser. My Gmail tab was likely still there, cached in the history, or perhaps it just auto-loaded. I can imagine the look on his face, the confusion, then the realization, then the slow, predatory grin. He saw the amount, $4,000 for wood. He saw the address, a mansion on the hill. He saw the name, Ivy Thistledown. He did not call me. He did not text me. He was too smart for that. He went to my parents. I can picture the scene in their kitchen, the emergency family meeting, Austin, playing the victim, holding the printed receipt like a smoking gun. "Look at this," he would say, his voice trembling with feigned hurt. "Ivy told you she was broke. She told you she lost everything. But look, she just bought a mansion. She is spending thousands on floors while I can't even get a car to go to work." My mother would gasp, clutching her chest. She lied to us? Her own mother? "She is hiding millions. Mom." Austin would escalate. "That house? It is worth a fortune. She probably used the money Grandma left, the money that should have been for the whole family." "That selfish girl," my father would growl, slamming his hand on the table. "We sacrificed everything for her. She is cutting us out," Austin would whisper, planting the seed. She wants to live like a queen while we starve. Unless what? Unless we take back what is ours. I knew none of this. I was blissfully ignorant. Sealed inside my fortress. I had just finished the living room. It was the first room to be fully completed. I had refinished the floors, not with the expensive oak from the receipt, which was still in the garage, but by restoring the original pine I found underneath the carpet. I had painted the walls a soft, dove gray. I had brought in a few pieces of furniture from my apartment, a velvet armchair, a standing lamp, a rug. I stood in the center of the room. It was raining outside, a torrential downpour that lashed against the windows, but inside, it was warm and dry. The fire I had built in the hearth crackled softly. For the first time in 29 years, I felt a sensation I could not name immediately. My shoulders dropped, the knot in my stomach uncoiled. Home. This was mine. Every nail, every board, every drop of sweat. I had built a sanctuary where their voices could not reach me. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine and sat in the velvet chair, watching the firelight dance on the freshly painted walls. I felt safe. I felt invincible. And then, the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, insistent press that echoed through the empty hallways like a scream. I froze. No one knew I was here. I had not given the address to anyone except the contractors, and they never came at 10 o'clock at night in a storm. I set my wine glass down. My heart began to pound, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Maybe it was a neighbor? A delivery driver lost in the storm? I walked into the foyer, my boots echoing on the marble. I approached the heavy oak door. I did not have a peephole installed yet. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob. "Ivy!" The voice was muffled by the thick wood and the roaring wind, but I recognized it instantly. It was a voice that had demanded my lunch money in elementary school, a voice that had gaslit me through high school, a voice that had claimed my achievements as its own. "Ivy, open the door. We know you are in there." It was Austin, and he was not alone. I could hear my father's cough. I could hear my mother's sharp tone giving directions. "Open up, Ivy. It is raining out here. Open this door right now." The sanctuary dissolved. The walls I had sanded with such love suddenly felt thin, fragile. My fortress had been breached not by an army, but by a receipt I forgot to delete. I stood there, paralyzed, as the doorknob jiggled violently. They were not knocking. They were trying to get in. The war had arrived at my doorstep, and I was holding nothing but a glass of wine and a scraper. I took a deep breath, the taste of cedar and old dust filling my lungs one last time before the toxicity rushed in. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click sounded like a gunshot. I opened the door. The storm outside was nothing compared to the atmospheric pressure change that occurred the moment I opened that door. My family stood on the porch, drenched. The rain hammered against the roof of the portico. But they did not seem to feel the cold. They were staring past me, their eyes wide, devouring the foyer of the hawthorn. It was a look I had seen before, on wolves in nature documentaries when they spot a wounded deer. It was hunger. It was calculation. "Well, my mother," Brenda said, shaking her wet umbrella onto my freshly polished marble floor without a second thought. "You certainly know how to keep a secret, Ivy." She did not wait for an invitation. She pushed past me, her shoulder checking mine with surprising force. My father, Marcus, followed, his heavy boots squeaking against the stone. Austin brought up the rear. He looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips, and stepped inside. "Nice crib, sis," he said. "Way better than that shoebox you live in downtown." I stood frozen by the open door, the wind blowing rain onto my back. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice tight. "How did you find me?" "Don't play dumb," Austin called out. He was already halfway down the hall, heading straight for the living room, my sanctuary. "You left your email open. Rookie mistake for a smart architect." I slammed the front door shut, cutting off the wind. but the chill remained inside. I hurried after them. When I reached the living room, my breath caught in my throat. Austin had bypassed the wooden chairs. He had thrown his soaking wet body onto the vintage velvet armchair, the one I had spent $600 reupholstering just last week. He kicked his feet up onto the coffee table, his muddy sneakers resting inches from my glass of wine. "Austin, get your feet off the table," I snapped, the authority in my voice surprising even me. "And get off the chair. You are wet." "Relax, Ivy," he laughed, grabbing my wine glass and taking a swig. "It is just furniture. Family is more important than things. Right, Mom?" My mother was spinning in the center of the room, looking up at the high ceilings and the restored crown molding. Her face was flushed, her eyes glittering with a terrifying sort of pride. "Finally," she breathed, ignoring my protest. "Finally, you have done something sensible with your money. I was telling your father in the car. Maybe Ivy isn't selfish. Maybe she was just preparing a surprise for us." "This is not a surprise for you," I said, stepping between her and the fireplace. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. Mine alone." My father walked over to the fireplace, inspecting the brickwork with a critical, proprietary eye. He turned to me, his face set in a hard line. "Your name?" he scoffed. "And where did the money come from? Ivy? It came from this family. It came from the sacrifices we made to feed you and clothe you. It came from your grandmother. It came from my salary," I corrected him, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "And the inheritance Grandma left to me." "That was a mistake," my father said, his voice rising. "Your grandmother was senile. She did not know what she was doing. By rights, that money belonged to the firstborn son. It belonged to Austin. You stealing it to buy this palace. It is theft, plain and simple." "Theft?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Grandma left it to me because she knew Austin would spend it on gambling and sneakers within a week. And she was right. Look at him." I pointed at Austin. He was picking mud off his shoe and flicking it onto my rug. "Hey!" Austin sat up, looking offended. "I am an investor. You don't understand the market, Ivy. And anyway, this place is perfect. Mom was right." He looked around the room, nodding. "Yeah, this works. The master bedroom is upstairs, right? I will take that one. It has the best light for my streaming setup. You can take one of the smaller rooms in the back. Or, honestly, the basement looks dry. You like privacy, right?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Excuse me?" My mother stepped forward, placing a cold, damp hand on my arm. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Ivy, sweetie, listen. We have been discussing it. Austin is ready to settle down. He is talking to a very nice girl online. They are practically engaged. They need a start, a real home to raise a family in." "What girl?" I asked. "The one he met on a gaming forum last week? The one who lives in Canada and he has never seen on video?" "Don't be jealous, Ivy," my mother snapped. "The point is, this house is too big for a single woman with no prospects. It is wasteful. Austin needs the space. He is the man of the family. He needs to build a legacy." "I am the one building a legacy," I shouted, my control finally snapping. "I bought this house. I sanded these floors with my own hands until they bled. I paid for every nail, every wire, every light bulb. You are not taking this from me." Austin stood up, the velvet chair groaning under the shift in weight. He walked over to me, looming. He was 3 inches taller than me, and he used that height now, invading my personal space. "You are so greedy," he sneered. "You have a high-paying job. You have a fancy apartment in the city. Why do you need this too? You should be living in a studio, saving money, not playing princess in a castle while your brother suffers." "Suffers?" I stepped back, disgusted. "You live rent-free. You eat their food. You drive a car I paid for. You have never suffered a day in your life. Austin, you are a parasite." The slap was shocking not because it hurt. It didn't, really, but because of who delivered it. My father had stepped forward and backhanded the air, his knuckles grazing my shoulder as I flinched away. It was a warning shot. "Watch your mouth," he growled. "That is your brother. You will respect him. Now, here is how this is going to work. You are going to sign over the title to Austin. We will manage the property. You can keep a room here for weekends if you behave, but this house is now a family asset." "Get out," I whispered. "What?" My mother looked confused, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "Get out," I screamed, pointing at the door. "Get out of my house. Now." "You cannot kick us out," Austin laughed, crossing his arms. "It is raining, and we are family. I am calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone in my back pocket. "I will tell them there are intruders. I have the deed. I have the receipts. You have nothing." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The aggression evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sickening performance of victimhood. My mother's face crumpled. Tears, instantaneous and practiced, welled up in her eyes. "Ivy!" she wailed, clutching her chest. "How can you be so cruel? We are your parents. We raised you. We changed your diapers. And now you want to call the police on us? On a rainy night? Do you want to kill your father? You know he has high blood pressure." "He seemed fine when he was threatening to take my house 5 seconds ago," I said, unlocking my phone. "You have 10 seconds. Please, Ivy." My father's voice dropped, becoming wheedling. "Be reasonable. We are just worried about you. You cannot handle a place like this alone. It is too much work. We just want to help you manage it, for the good of the family." 1, I counted. "Ivy, don't do this," Austin said, his smirk gone, replaced by a flash of panic. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He had seen me fire contractors for cutting corners. He knew the look in my eyes. 2, "We are leaving," my mother shrieked, grabbing her purse. "My God, you have a heart of stone. Ivy Thistledown, a heart of stone. I don't know where we went wrong with you." 3, they moved. They scrambled toward the hallway. A chaotic mess of wet coats and angry muttering. I followed them, my phone held high like a weapon. Austin stopped at the front door. He turned back to me, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. The charm was gone. The entrepreneur facade was gone. There was only the ugly entitlement of a man who had been told the world owed him everything. "You think you won?" he hissed, spit flying from his mouth. "You think a piece of paper makes this yours? You are nothing, Ivy. You are just the bank account. This house belongs to me, by blood, by right, and I am going to take it." "Get out," I shoved him. It was a physical push. My hands against his damp chest. He stumbled backward onto the porch, nearly slipping on the wet wood. My parents were already halfway down the steps, huddled under their umbrella, looking back at me with eyes that promised retribution. "You will regret this," my father shouted over the thunder. "You will die alone in this big house, Ivy, and we will not be there to bury you." I slammed the heavy oak door in their faces. I threw the deadbolt. I threw the secondary lock. I engaged the security chain. I stood there in the foyer, my chest heaving, listening to the muffled sounds of them screaming over the wind. I heard a heavy kick against the door, then another. "It is mine!" Austin screamed from the other side. "It is mine!" Then, I heard the sound of their car engine starting. The headlights swept across the stained glass window above the door, casting long, colored shadows on the floor. Then they were gone. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the cold marble. I was shaking violently now, not from cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I looked at the mud Austin had tracked in, a trail of dirty footprints leading straight into the heart of my home. They were gone, but the invasion had happened. They had seen it. They had smelled the money. They had tasted the potential. And unlike the vampires in the stories, my family did not need an invitation to come back. They would return. And next time, they would not just bring dirty shoes. They would bring lawyers. I stood up, wiped the tears I hadn't realized were falling, and walked to the kitchen to get a mop. I had a mess to clean up. And then, I had a war to prepare for. The silence of my phone was a lie. It sat on the conference table in Chicago, dark and innocent, while my life back in Blackwood was being dismantled. Sterling and Stone had sent me away for 3 days. It was a high-stakes pitch for a new museum complex, the kind of project that usually made my blood sing with adrenaline. But this time, I felt only a sick, heavy dread coiling in my stomach. I had installed a wireless security system at the Hawthorne 2 days before I left. A rush job. Sensors stuck to windows with adhesive strips. A camera pointed at the back door. It was a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but it was all I had time for. The meeting dragged on. The client, a man who loved the sound of his own voice, was debating the merits of limestone versus granite for the 3rd hour. I nodded politely, sketching on my notepad, but my mind was 300 miles away, hovering over a house on a hill. Then, the notification came. My phone screen lit up. Motion detected. Rear entry. 2:45 p.m. I froze. The client was still talking, but the sound faded into a dull buzz. I slid the phone into my lap and opened the app. The video feed loaded, grainy and buffering. There they were. It was not a stealthy break-in. It was an invasion. My father was wielding a crowbar, jamming it into the frame of the French doors I had just repainted. Austin was standing behind him, holding a box of pizza and pointing at the lock, directing the destruction like a foreman. My mother was dragging a large, floral suitcase up the patio steps. I watched, helpless in a boardroom in Chicago. As the wood splintered, I saw the door swing open. I saw them step inside. "I have to go," I said, standing up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Excuse me?" the client asked, offended. "We are not finished." "Family emergency," I choked out. I did not wait for permission. I ran. The drive back was a blur of highway lines and panic. I drove 80 miles an hour the entire way, my hands gripping the steering wheel until they ached. By the time I reached the winding roads of Blackwood, the sun had set, casting the town in long, sinister shadows. I did not pull into my driveway. I could not. There was a moving truck parked there, a rusted, rented moving truck that was leaking oil onto my gravel. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They hadn't just broken in to look around. They were moving in. I dialed 911. "State Police, what is your emergency?" "My home is being burglarized," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "There are intruders inside, 42 Blackwood Lane. I need an officer immediately. Are you in a safe location?" "Ma'am?" "I am in the driveway." "Stay in your vehicle. Officers are dispatched." I sat there, watching the windows of my house, light up one by one. I saw silhouettes moving in the living room. I saw a shadow pass across the bedroom window. It was a violation so profound it felt physical, like a punch to the gut. 2 patrol cars arrived 10 minutes later, their blue and red lights flashing against the Victorian facade of the Hawthorne. I got out of my car and met the officers. "They are inside," I told the lead officer, a man named Miller who looked like he had been on shift for 20 hours. 3 of them. They broke the back lock." Officer Miller nodded and walked up to the front door. He pounded on it. "Police, open up." The door opened. My father stood there. He was wearing a cardigan and holding a cup of coffee. My coffee. From my kitchen. He looked at the police with an expression of mild, confused concern. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked. "This lady says you broke into her home," Miller said, thumbing in my direction. My father chuckled, a warm, grandfatherly sound that made my skin crawl. "Broke in? Officer, this is a misunderstanding. This is our daughter. We are moving in. We own the place." "That is a lie," I screamed from the bottom of the steps. "I have the deed. I am the sole owner." My mother appeared behind my father. Wiping her hands on an apron, she looked at the police with wide, innocent eyes. Oh, dear. Is Ivy having another episode? Officer, I am so sorry. Our daughter has been under a lot of stress lately. She gets confused. I am not confused. I marched up the steps, pulling the deed from my bag. I carried it with me everywhere now. Here, look at this. Ivy Thistledown. It is my name. Only my name. Officer Miller took the paper and shone his flashlight on it. He squinted. It looks legal, he said to my father. Of course the house is in her name technically, my father said smoothly. We put it in her name for tax purposes. You know how it is. But we paid for it, and we have an agreement. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of lined notebook paper. It was wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee. He handed it to the officer. She signed this last week, my father said. A gift deed, transferring rights to her brother, Austin, so he can manage the estate for the family. Officer Miller looked at the notebook paper. I craned my neck to see. It was scrawled in blue ballpoint pen. Ivy Thistledown, hereby give full access and ownership of the Hawthorne to Austin Thistledown. Beneath it was a signature that looked vaguely like mine. But the loop on the Y was wrong. It was a forgery, a clumsy, childish forgery. That is not my signature, I shouted. They wrote that. That is a piece of scrap paper. It is not notarized. It is not filed. Officer Miller sighed, handing the papers back. He looked from me to my parents, who were standing there with the serene confidence of people who have believed their own lies for decades. Ma'am, Miller said to me, this looks like a civil dispute. The words hit me harder than the sight of the moving truck. What? You have a deed. They have a signed document claiming transfer. We are not judges. We cannot determine the validity of a contract on a front porch at 9 o'clock at night. You gave them a key? Or they have possession? They broke the lock. I pointed to the back of the house. Go look at the French doors. We had to force it, Austin shouted from inside the hallway. He was eating a slice of pizza. The key she gave us broke off in the lock. We had to get inside out of the cold. It is our house, man. It is a civil matter, Miller repeated, stepping back. We cannot evict someone who claims residency and has paperwork, even if it is handwritten. You will have to take this to court to get an eviction order. You are leaving them here? I asked, my voice trembling. With my things? They are destroying my property. If you feel unsafe, you should stay elsewhere for the night, Miller advised. Sort it out in the morning. If there is violence, call us back. But right now, this is a family squabble. The police got back in their cars. I watched them drive away, the red tail lights disappearing into the fog. I was alone. My father smiled at me. It was a cold, victorious smile. Go back to the city. Ivy, you are not wanted here. He closed the door. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the wood. I could hear them inside. I could hear the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across my pine floors. Scrape, scrape. It sounded like they were dragging the furniture across my heart. I walked to the back of the house to peer through the broken French doors. What I saw broke me. Austin had taken over the library, the room I had spent weeks restoring, the room where I found the journals. He had pushed the antique desk against the wall. In the center of the room, he had set up a massive gaming station with 3 monitors. Neon LED strips were taped directly onto the original Victorian wallpaper. He was sitting in a racing chair, wearing a headset, shouting into a microphone. Yeah, boys, I told you, new setup, the mansion life. He had drilled holes. I could see the drywall dust on the floor. He had drilled holes through the wainscoting to run his Ethernet cables. I turned away, vomiting bile into the rhododendron bushes. I could not go in. If I went in, I would do something that would send me to prison, and then they really would win. I drove to the only hotel in Blackwood, a roadside motel with flickering neon signs and carpets that smelled of stale cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed, listening to the trucks rumble past on the highway. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, plotting. The next morning, the process server found me. He must have been waiting for me to leave the motel. He was a small, nervous man who shoved a thick envelope into my chest as I was loading my suitcase into the car. Ivy Thistledown? Yes. You have been served. I sat in the driver's seat and tore open the envelope. It was a lawsuit. Plaintiffs: Marcus and Brenda Thistledown. Defendant: Ivy Thistledown. Cause of action: fraud, misappropriation of funds, breach of verbal contract. I read the summary of the complaint, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. It was a work of fiction so audacious it belonged on a bestseller list. They claimed that 2 years ago. We had entered into a verbal family trust agreement. They claimed they had given me cash, $50,000 here, $10,000 there, over the course of a decade, totaling $200,000, with the specific instruction to invest it in real estate for the benefit of the family patriarch and firstborn son. They claimed I had embezzled this family fund to buy the Hawthorne in my own name. Cutting them out, they were suing for the title of the house. They were suing for emotional distress. They were asking for me to pay their legal fees. And the lawyer representing them? Barry Zuckerman. I knew the name. He was a billboard lawyer. The kind who advertised on the sides of buses with slogans like, "Injured, get paid." He was cheap, he was dirty, and he was loud. They were not just trying to take the house, they were trying to destroy my reputation. If this lawsuit became public, if Sterling and Stone heard that I was being sued for fraud and embezzlement, my license could be suspended. My partnership track would be incinerated. They knew this. They were banking on it. They thought I would settle. They thought I would sign the deed over just to make the nightmare stop. I looked at the motel phone. I looked at the lawsuit. Something inside me died in that moment. The last vestige of the little girl who just wanted her parents to be proud of her. The daughter who thought that if she just worked hard enough, built a big enough house, earned enough money, they would finally love her. That girl was gone. She had been evicted last night. In her place sat a woman who had nothing left to lose. I picked up my cell phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call the police. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I had saved years ago. A number every architect at my firm whispered with a mix of fear and reverence. Eleanor Vance. She was not just a lawyer, she was a legend. She was the corporate counsel for Sterling and Stone, a woman who ate zoning boards for breakfast and destroyed liability claims for lunch. She cost $800 an hour, and she was worth every penny. I hit dial. Vance, a sharp, gravelly voice, answered on the first ring. Eleanor, I said, my voice steady, cold as the marble floor of my foyer. This is Ivy Thistledown. I have a situation. It involves property theft, fraud, and a lawsuit filed by my parents. There was a pause. Then, I heard the click of a lighter and the inhale of a cigarette. Parents? Eleanor asked. Those are usually the messy ones. Are you looking to settle, Ivy? No, I said. I am looking to burn them to the ground. Good, Eleanor said. I have an opening at 2:00. Bring the deed. Bring the lawsuit. And Ivy? Yes? Stop crying. Tears rust the machinery. I touched my cheek. I hadn't realized I was crying. I wiped the moisture away and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hard. My jaw was set. I am not crying, Eleanor, I said. I am just clearing my vision. I hung up. I started the car. The engine roared to life. The invasion had happened. They had taken the territory. But they had forgotten one thing. They had trapped themselves inside a fortress with a structural engineer who knew exactly where the load-bearing walls were. And I was about to bring the whole thing down on top of them. The law firm of Sterling and Stone did not handle domestic squabbles. We handled corporate mergers, international trade disputes, and zoning wars for skyscrapers. Entering the office of Eleanor Vance was like stepping into a sterilized operating theater. The air was colder than the hallway, filtered and scentless. The furniture was chrome and black leather, designed to be impressive rather than comfortable. Eleanor sat behind a desk that looked like a slab of obsidian. She was 60 years old, with silver hair cut in a bob so sharp it could sever a jugular. She did not look up when I entered. She was reading the lawsuit my parents had filed, flipping the pages with a rhythmic, dismissive snap. "Sit," she commanded, not breaking her rhythm. I sat. I placed my hands on my knees to stop them from trembling. "This is garbage," Eleanor said finally. Closing the file, she looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses. "Legally speaking, it is a pile of burning refuse, but procedurally, it is a landmine." "They want the house," I said, my voice steady. "They say they paid for it." "They are claiming a constructive trust," Eleanor corrected, leaning back. "It is a legal theory used when a property is held by one person for the benefit of another. Usually, it is for cases where a grandmother puts a house in a grandchild's name to avoid taxes. But everyone knows it is still Grandma's house. Your parents are arguing that you are merely the trustee, and your brother, Austin, is the beneficiary." "That is a lie," I said. "I used my own money." "I know that. You know that. But the court does not know that yet." Eleanor tapped a manicured fingernail on the file. "Their lawyer, this Barry Zuckerman, is a bottom feeder. But he is clever. He knows he cannot trace a bank transfer from them to you because it does not exist. So, he has fabricated a narrative of cash." She opened the file to page 4. "According to this affidavit signed by your father, Marcus Thistledown, he and your mother handed you $200,000 in cash on November 15th, 2025. They claim this was their life savings, kept in a safe at home because they do not trust banks. They claim they gave it to you specifically to purchase the Hawthorne on behalf of Austin. Because Austin has, and I quote, unfortunate credit history due to medical debts." "Medical debts?" I nearly choked. "Gambling debts." "The court does not care about the semantics yet," Eleanor said coldly. "The problem with a cash claim is that it is impossible to disprove with a paper trail. You cannot produce a bank statement showing a lack of deposit. They are counting on the he said, she said dynamic. They want to get this in front of a jury. Juries love elderly parents who claim to be swindled by their successful, corporate daughter. So they can just lie? And I lose my house? No, we destroy them. But we have to be surgical." Eleanor slid a stack of photos across the desk. "They have submitted evidence, text messages. I picked up the photos. They were screenshots of a text conversation between me and Austin." Austin: "Hey sis, did you get the cash from Dad?" Ivy: "Yes, I got it. It is safe." Austin: "Cool. Make sure you sign the papers for the house soon." Ivy: "I will handle it. Don't worry." I stared at the paper, my blood running cold. I never wrote this. I wrote, "Yes, I got it," when he asked if I got his birthday card 3 years ago. And I wrote, "I will handle it," when Mom asked me to pick up a turkey for Thanksgiving. They spliced these. They took sentences from different years and pasted them together. "Digital fabrication," Eleanor nodded. "Common in cheap divorce cases. Harder to prove if they claim they lost the original phone, which they inevitably will. They also have witnesses. 2 men, a Mr. Joseph Moretti, and a Mr. Kyle Jenkins." "I don't know them," I said. "They are listed as family friends. They have sworn affidavits stating they were present at a dinner where you explicitly agreed to hold the title for Austin until he got back on his feet. They are Austin's poker buddies," I realized. "I met them once. They smelled like stale beer in desperation." "They are perjuring themselves," Eleanor said. "But right now, they are evidence." The intercom on her desk buzzed. "Ms. Vance? Ivy's bank is online too. They are confirming the freeze." I felt the room spin. "Freeze? What freeze?" "Standard procedure in a fraud allegation involving real estate," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "Zuckerman filed an emergency motion this morning. He argued that you are a flight risk and that you might liquidate the asset, the house, and vanish with the family money. The judge granted a temporary restraining order on your assets." "My accounts?" I stood up. My checking account? My savings? Everything except your payroll account. Usually, but yes, you are effectively broke until the hearing. I walked out of Eleanor's office feeling like I had been stripped naked. I went to the coffee shop in the lobby of the Sterling and Stone building. I ordered a black coffee. When I tapped my card, the machine beeped a harsh, dissonant tone, declined. The barista, a girl I saw every day, looked at me with pity. Maybe the chip is dirty? No, I said, pulling my hand back as if the machine had bitten me. It is not the chip. I walked away without the coffee. The elevator ride up to the architectural department felt like a funeral procession. When the doors opened, the hum of the office stopped for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but I heard it. Eyes darted away, heads lowered. The rumor mill at Sterling and Stone was faster than fiber optics. I heard she stole her parents' retirement fund. I heard a whisper from the cubicles near the plotter. Seriously? She drives that old Honda. I thought she was humble. Guess she was just hoarding. My cousin knows her brother, says she kicked him out into the rain. I walked straight to my office and closed the door. I sat in my expensive ergonomic chair and stared at the skyline of the city I helped build. I was a lead architect. I managed budgets of $50 million, and I could not buy a cup of coffee. My own parents had not just declared war on me, they had launched a nuclear strike on my existence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Blackwood and burn the house down myself just so they couldn't have it. Stop, I told myself. That is what Austin would do. You are not Austin. I turned to my computer. If they wanted to play dirty, I needed to see just how deep the dirt went. Eleanor had said the cash claim was their offensive weapon. I needed a defensive weapon. I needed to know why Austin was so desperate for a house in his name now. I logged into a credit monitoring service. I had not checked my detailed credit report in 3 years. I usually just looked at the score, which was impeccable. But today, I downloaded the full 100-page PDF. I started scrolling past my student loans, paid, my car lease, paid, my credit cards. Then I stopped. On page 12, under closed accounts, there were entries I did not recognize. First National Bank, credit card, opened, June 2018, limit $10,000, status, charged off, bad debt, quick cash payday loans, opened, August 2019, status, default, luxury auto leasing, cosigner, Ivy Thistledown, status, repossessed. I stared at the dates. 2018. I was in graduate school then. I was living in a dorm, eating instant noodles. I had never opened a First National card. I looked at the address associated with these accounts. 12 Maple Street. My parents' house. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Austin hadn't just started using me now. He had been using me for years. He had used my social security number, which he likely found in my parents' filing cabinet, to open credit lines when he maxed out his own. He had run up debts in my name, ruined a credit history I didn't even know I had, and then let them default. The only reason my current score was high was because these were old enough to have dropped off the main calculation, or perhaps he had paid just enough to keep them from alerting me before letting them crash. I was not just a safety net, I was a host body. I printed the report. My hands were no longer shaking. They were steady with the cold precision of an assassin. I called Eleanor back. I found something, I said. Is it a receipt for the cash? She asked. Better. It is a felony. Austin committed identity theft. He opened 5 credit cards and a car lease in my name 7 years ago. There was a silence on the other end, then a low, appreciative hum. Well, Eleanor said, that changes the texture of the battlefield. I want to file a police report, I said. I want him arrested. Today. No, Eleanor said sharply. Not yet. Why? He stole my identity. Because if you arrest him now, the civil case for the house gets paused while the criminal case proceeds. That could take 2 years. In the meantime, your parents are living in your house, destroying your floors, and you are paying the mortgage on a frozen account. We need the civil verdict first. We need the judge to give you the house back. Then we drop the hammer. So I just let them think they are winning? Exactly. We play the rope-a-dope. Let them get confident. Let them lie under oath. Let them testify on public record that they are honest, upstanding citizens. And then, when they have nowhere left to run, we introduce the credit report. It feels like I'm drowning. Eleanor, you are not drowning. Ivy, you are holding your breath. There is a difference. I hung up. I put the credit report in my safe. That evening, the official summons arrived at my apartment in the city. A process server taped it to my door because I refused to open it. Superior Court of Blackwood County. Hearing date, February 3rd, 2026. Presiding Judge, Honorable Percival Hawthorne. I stared at the name. Hawthorne. The same name as my house. It was a coincidence, surely. But in my exhausted, paranoid state, it felt like an omen. I spent the next week in a fugue state. I went to work. I ignored the whispers. I ate sandwiches I made at home because I had no access to my money. I felt a profound, aching loneliness. The people who were supposed to be my foundation had turned out to be termites. But every night, I looked at the grainy security footage on my phone. I watched my parents sitting in my living room, drinking my wine, watching my television. I watched Austin sleeping in the master bedroom. Enjoy it, I whispered to the screen. Get comfortable. They thought they had broken me. They thought the frozen accounts and the shame would force me to settle. They did not know that I had spent my entire life learning how to build things that could withstand hurricanes. I was not going to settle. I was going to court, and I was going to bring the whole structure down on their heads. The week before the trial was not spent in prayer or panic. It was spent in the trenches of excavation. If my family wanted to drag the past into the light, I was going to make sure we brought up the skeletons they had buried in the backyard, not just the ones they invented. I hired a private investigator named Silas. He was not like the detectives on television who wore trench coats and drank whiskey. He was a forensic accountant who worked out of a small office above a bakery, and he smelled faintly of yeast and toner ink. I paid him a retainer of $5,000 using a check from my payroll account, the only one Barry Zuckerman had not managed to freeze. Find the money, I told him. They claimed they had $200,000 in cash sitting in a safe. Prove they didn't. Silas worked fast. 3 days later, he slid a dossier across his desk. Your parents are not just broke, Ivy, Silas said, tapping the paper. They are destitute, and the interesting part is not that they don't have the money now. It is that they did have it 3 years ago, or at least, they had access to it. I opened the file. It was an autopsy of my parents' financial demise. In 2023, my father had refinanced their home. He pulled out $150,000 of equity. He also liquidated his 401k, taking a massive tax penalty. Where did it go? I asked. Here, Silas pointed to a series of transfers. To a cryptocurrency exchange platform that is now defunct, and to an offshore online gambling site based in Malta. Austin, I whispered. The accounts were under your father's name, Silas noted. But the IP addresses used to access them? They trace back to a mobile device registered to Austin Thistledown. The picture became sickeningly clear. Austin had not just stolen my identity. He had bled our parents dry first. He had convinced them to liquidate their retirement, probably promising them massive returns on some sure-thing investment in digital currency. And when the market crashed, or when he gambled it away, the money vanished. The $200,000 they claimed to have given me was a ghost. It was the money they wished they still had. They were suing me not just out of greed, but out of necessity. They were drowning, and I was the only life raft left. This proves they didn't give me cash, I said. They didn't have it to give. It proves they had significant losses, Silas corrected. But a jury might still believe they had a separate stash of cash under the mattress. You need more to prove intent. You need to prove they are lying about the house. I thanked Silas and left. I had the financial gun. Now I needed the motive. I went back to the storage unit where I kept my grandmother's boxes. I had saved everything she left me, even the things that seemed trivial. I dug through a crate marked medical/legal. My father had claimed in his deposition that Grandma was senile when she left me the inheritance, implying I had manipulated a confused old woman. I found her medical records from the year she died. Patient: Margaret Vance. Mental status exam: 29 out of 30. Cognitively intact. No signs of dementia. She was sharper at 80 than Austin was at 30. Then I found the original draft of her will. Stapled to it was a handwritten note. The ink faded but legible. I recognized the date. It matched an entry in the journals I had found in the secret compartment of the Hawthorne. I pulled out the journal from my bag. I carried them everywhere now, and found the entry. November 4th, 2014. Brenda and Marcus came over today. They brought Austin. They did not stay for tea. They sat me down and told me I needed to change the will. They said Ivy would just marry a rich man eventually, so she didn't need the money. They said Austin needed a head start. Marcus slammed his fist on the table when I said no. I am afraid of them. I am afraid of what they are turning my grandson into. I felt a chill run down my spine. They had tried to bully her. And when that failed, they waited until she was dead to try to bully me. I needed a witness, someone who wasn't me. I drove to the old neighborhood where I grew up. I parked down the street from my parents' house, which looked neglected, the lawn overgrown, and walked to the house next door, Mrs. Gable. She was the neighborhood watch captain, a woman who spent her days peering through her blinds. She opened the door, looking suspicious until she recognized me. "Ivy? Good Lord, I haven't seen you in years. You look tired." "I am fighting a war, Mrs. Gable," I said. We sat in her living room. I asked her about Austin. "That boy," she scoffed. "He is a menace. I caught him trying to break into my garage last summer to steal my husband's tools. Your father begged me not to call the police. He paid me $500 to keep quiet." "Did Austin ever talk about me?" I asked. Mrs. Gable hesitated. "He used to brag, especially when he was drinking on the porch with his friends. I heard him once, maybe 6 months ago. He was shouting into his phone. He said, 'My sister is a cash cow. She just doesn't know she's being raised for slaughter. Once she buys a place, I am moving in. It is basically my birthright.'" "Would you testify to that?" I asked. "Under oath?" Mrs. Gable looked at her hands, then at the photo of her own grandchildren on the mantel. "For you? Yes, I always liked you. Ivy, you were the only one in that house who didn't make me want to lock my doors." I had the money trail. I had the grandmother's defense. I had a character witness. But I needed one more thing. I needed to hear them admit it. I went back to my apartment and logged into my old cloud storage account. I had backed up my phone data there for years. I searched for audio files. I found a file dated 3 years ago. Thanksgiving argument. I put on my headphones and pressed play. The sound of shouting filled my ears. Voice of Brenda. "He is a mess. Marcus, he lost another $5,000. We can't keep bailing him out." Voice of Marcus. "He is our son. What do you want me to do? Let him go to jail? Ivy will never help him. She is too selfish. We have to cover for him until he hits it big." Voice of Brenda. "He is a burden, Marcus. A heavy, heavy burden." I drove to Blackwood, parking my rental car. I had swapped vehicles to avoid recognition, a mile away from the Hawthorne. I walked through the woods that bordered the property. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft and muddy. I knew every inch of this land. I knew where the fence was broken. I knew which floorboards on the back porch squeaked. The house was dark, save for the blue flicker of the television in the living room and the glow from the library where Austin had set up his gaming command center. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would alert the motion sensors, but I knew the sensors. I had bought them. I knew the blind spots. I crept to the basement window on the north side. It was a small window, obscured by a hydrangea bush. The latch was loose. I had noted it on my inspection list but hadn't fixed it yet. Thank God for procrastination. I slid the window open. It groaned softly. I froze. Inside, I heard footsteps above me. Heavy. My father. Did you hear that? His voice muffled through the floorboards. Hear what? Austin's voice. Probably a raccoon. Relax, old man. We own this place now. I waited 5 minutes. Then I slid feet first into the basement. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth. I turned on my pen light. Keeping the beam low, I moved to the HVAC unit. The ventilation ducts ran through the entire house. If I placed the listening device here, the metal would carry the sound. But it would be echoey. No, I needed to be closer. I crept up the basement stairs. The door at the top opened into the kitchen pantry. I listened. Silence. I cracked the door open. The kitchen was empty. Pizza boxes were piled on my granite island. Beer bottles littered the counter. The disrespect made my blood boil. But I pushed the anger down. I moved like a shadow. I placed a tiny, high-powered recorder, bought from a spy shop in the city, on top of the kitchen cabinets, tucked behind the crown molding. It was invisible from below. I needed one in the living room. I could hear the TV, a game show. My parents were in there. I crawled on my hands and knees behind the kitchen island. I had an angle to the living room archway. My mother was asleep on the sofa. My sofa. My father was in the recliner, reading a newspaper. I couldn't get into the room. It was too risky. Then I saw the vent. The return air vent was on the wall right next to the archway. Near the floor, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the second recorder. It had a magnetic back. I reached out, my hand trembling, and stuck it to the inside of the metal vent cover. Clink. My father looked up. What was that? I held my breath. I pressed myself flat against the back of the kitchen island. Brenda, he said. My mother snored. My father sighed and rustled his paper. He didn't get up. I let out a breath that took 10 years off my life. I retreated, back to the pantry, back down the stairs, out the window. I didn't stop shaking until I was back in my car, a mile away. I sat there in the dark and put on the headphones connected to the receiver app on my phone. The devices were voice-activated and uploaded to a secure server in real time. For an hour, I heard nothing but the TV and my mother's snoring. Then, around 11 o'clock, Austin came downstairs. Yo, he said. I am hungry. There is pizza left, my father said. Cold pizza again, Austin complained. Man, I can't wait to unload this dump. I pressed the record button on my app, ensuring a local copy. Got you. Keep your voice down, my father hissed. Why? Austin laughed. Ivy is gone. She's probably crying in a motel. Look, I talked to that realtor guy, Jenkins. He says if we sell quickly, as is, we can get 1.5 million, maybe 1.6. We have to win the lawsuit first, my father said. Zuckerman says it looks good, but we need to be careful. We will win, Austin said, his mouth full of food. She is weak. She will fold. And once we get the title, boom, we sell. I take my cut, 800 large, and I'm moving to Vegas. You guys can take the rest and buy a condo in Florida or whatever. We need to pay off the debts first. My mother's sleepy voice chimed in. The loan sharks are calling again. Marcus? We will pay them, my father said. 1.5 million covers everything. It clears the slate. And Ivy? She can start over. She is young. She can build another house. Yeah, Austin sneered. She likes working. Let her work. I am retired. I stopped the recording. I sat in the silence of my car. They didn't want the home. They didn't want the memories. They didn't want a place for the family. They wanted a liquidation event. They were going to sell my sanctuary, the place where my grandmother had scrubbed floors, the place I had poured my soul into, just to pay off gambling debts and fund a fantasy life in Vegas. She can build another house. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. To them, my labor was infinite and valueless, a natural resource they could strip mine whenever they pleased. I drove back to the city. I did not sleep. I listened to that recording over and over again. Let her work. I am retired. The next morning, I walked into the office. I was wearing my best suit, a sharp navy blue number that made me look like armor plating. My colleagues looked away, expecting to see the broken woman from the rumors. Instead, I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, but it was there. I called Eleanor. I have it, I said. They are planning to sell. They admitted it on tape. They have a realtor lined up. Perfect, Eleanor said. Bring it all. The day before the trial, I met my parents for the mandatory mediation session. It was a formality. They sat across the long table. My mother looked frail and weepy, clutching a tissue. My father looked stern and disappointed. Austin looked bored, scrolling on his phone. Barry Zuckerman, their lawyer, wore a suit that was too shiny. Ms. Thistledown, he said, my clients are willing to be generous. If you sign over the deed today, they will agree not to press criminal charges for the embezzlement of the family funds. I looked at my parents. I looked at Austin. I channeled every ounce of acting ability I had. I let my shoulders slump. I let my lip tremble. I looked down at my hands. I don't know, I whispered. I just worked so hard. It is for the best, Ivy, my mother said softly. You can't handle the pressure. Let your brother take the burden. If I sign. I looked up, making my eyes wide and fearful. Will you promise to keep the house? Grandma loved this house. I just want to know it stays in the family. Of course, my father said, looking me straight in the eye without blinking. We will never sell it. It is the Thistledown legacy now. Yeah, Austin said, not looking up from his phone. Legacy, for sure. I looked at Eleanor. She gave a microscopic nod. I need to think about it, I said, my voice breaking. I will see you in court tomorrow. We walked out. As the door closed, I heard Austin laugh. She is cracking. Did you see her face? She is totally cracking. I walked down the hallway, the sound of my heels clicking on the linoleum like the ticking of a bomb. Yes, Austin. I thought, I am cracking. But you are the one standing on the fault line. Tomorrow, the facade would drop. Tomorrow, the good daughter would die. And the architect of their destruction would take the stand. I had the blueprints. I had the materials. And I was ready to bring the roof down. The art of war. As I had come to understand it during my years navigating the shark-infested waters of corporate architecture, is not about the strength of your soldiers. It is about the deception of your appearance. If you are strong, appear weak. If you are near, appear far. And if you are holding a royal flush, you must make your opponent believe you are terrified of their pair of twos. For the final settlement conference, held 48 hours before the trial was scheduled to begin, I curated my appearance with the same meticulous attention to detail I used when designing a load-bearing truss. I did not wear the sharp navy suit I had worn to the office. I wore a gray, oversized cardigan that swallowed my frame, making me look smaller, more fragile. I wore my hair in a loose, messy bun, pulling out a few strands to suggest a woman who had stopped caring, and for the first time in a decade, I wore absolutely no makeup. The dark circles under my eyes, earned from sleepless nights of surveillance, stood out like bruises against my pale skin. I wanted them to see a broken woman. I wanted them to see a daughter who had been crushed by the weight of their disapproval. When I walked into the conference room at Barry Zuckerman's office, the effect was immediate. My mother, Brenda, actually smiled when she saw me. It was a pitying, victorious smile. She nudged my father, Marcus, and whispered something that looked like, "She is done." Austin was already sitting at the table, spinning a fidget spinner with one hand and texting with the other. He didn't even look up. He radiated the arrogance of a man who believes the world is his personal vending machine. "Sit down, Ms. Thistledown," Barry Zuckerman said. He was a man who seemed to be constructed entirely of hair gel and polyester. He offered me a glass of water with a benevolence that made my skin crawl. "You look exhausted." "I am," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the table. I just want this to be over. We all do, Zuckerman said, opening a folder. And that is why we are here. My clients, your loving parents, have instructed me to offer you a lifeline, a very generous lifeline. He slid a document across the polished mahogany table. It was a settlement agreement. Here is the deal, Zuckerman announced, leaning back in his chair and clasping his hands behind his head. You sign the deed over to Austin Thistledown today. In exchange, my clients will agree to drop the civil suit immediately. Furthermore, they will sign a waiver promising not to pursue criminal charges against you for the embezzlement of the $200,000. They are choosing mercy. Ms. Thistledown, they do not want to see their daughter in prison. I picked up the paper, my hands trembling slightly. The tremor was fake, but the nausea I felt was real. Prison? I squeaked. Fraud is a serious crime, my father said gravely. He was wearing his church suit. We spoke to the district attorney. They are very interested in this case, but we told them to wait. We told them we wanted to give you one last chance to do the right thing. It was a bluff, a clumsy, heavy-handed bluff. The district attorney would have laughed them out of the office without a paper trail, but I played along. I let my breath hitch. And, Zuckerman added, grinning as if he were Santa Claus, to help you get back on your feet, your parents are willing to give you a cash settlement, $10,000, a relocation fee, so you can move somewhere more affordable, maybe start over. $10,000. The house was appraised at $1,500,000. I had put $300,000 of my own cash into the down payment and renovations, and they were offering me $10,000 to walk away. It was an insult so profound it was almost funny. 10,000? I asked, looking at my mother. It is all we can spare. Ivy, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. After you took our life savings, we are tight, but we want to help you. We are family. I looked at the check sitting on the table. It was already written out. Paid to the order of Ivy Thistledown, $10,000. This was the trap. If I took the money, if I signed the paper, I would be admitting guilt. I would be validating their lie that the house was never mine. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump further. I don't know, I said softly. It is just that I put so much work into the house. Labor is not equity, Austin said. Finally looking up, his eyes were bright with greed. You were just decorating my house. Sis, thanks for that. By the way, I like the color in the living room. Austin, Zuckerman warned. But he was smiling too. He thought he had won. He was not looking for landmines. He was looking at his commission check. I have a question, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I looked at my father. If I sign this, if I give you the house, do you promise you won't sell it? Grandma loved that house. It means a lot to me that it stays in the family. This was the bait. My father straightened his tie. Of course. Ivy, we are not real estate speculators. We want a home, a place for Austin to settle down and raise a family. That house will be the Thistledown seat for generations. Yeah, Austin chimed in. I am going to live there forever, maybe put in a pool. I nodded slowly. And the $10,000? I asked, turning my gaze to Zuckerman. Where is this money coming from? Dad said he gave me all his savings. I don't want to take your last penny. Zuckerman waved his hand dismissively. My clients have liquidated some other small assets to make this happen. They are making a financial sacrifice to save you. Ms. Thistledown, you should be grateful. Liquidated assets, I repeated, memorizing the phrase. So, you have the money right now? In the bank? Yes, my mother said quickly. We have it. I knew for a fact they did not. My private investigator, Silas, had confirmed their accounts were overdrawn as of yesterday. If they had $10,000, it was a loan from a shark or a cash advance on a credit card they couldn't pay. Okay, I said. I picked up the pen. The room held its breath. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. I saw my mother's hand tighten on her purse. I saw Austin lean forward, his mouth slightly open. They were so hungry for the kill they couldn't see the cliff. I lowered the pen to the paper. I hovered the tip over the signature line. "Just sign right there," Zuckerman urged softly, "and this whole nightmare ends." I froze. I looked at the paper, then I looked up. I let the mask drop. I straightened my spine. I pushed the oversized sleeves of my sweater up, revealing my forearms. I lifted my chin, and I smiled. It was not the smile of a broken daughter. It was the smile of the shark that had been circling the boat while they were fishing for minnows. "No," I said. The word rang out in the room like a gunshot. "Excuse me?" Zuckerman blinked. I said no. I capped the pen with a loud, decisive click and set it down on the table. "I am not signing this garbage." "Ivy!" My father stood up, his face turning a blotchy red. "What are you doing? This is your only chance. We will send you to jail." "No, you won't," I said, my voice cool and steady. "Because you don't have a case. You don't have the money you claim to have. You don't have the money to pay this $10,000, and you definitely don't intend to live in that house." "You little—" Austin started to lunge, but Zuckerman held him back. "Ms. Thistledown," Zuckerman said, his voice losing its oily charm and becoming sharp. "You are making a grave mistake. The judge will not look kindly on you refusing a reasonable settlement." "Reasonable?" I stood up, smoothing down my sweater. "You are asking me to gift a $1.5 million asset to a man who has committed identity theft against me for 7 years, in exchange for $10,000 of imaginary money. That is not a settlement. Mr. Zuckerman, that is a robbery." "Identity theft?" Zuckerman looked at his clients. "What is she talking about?" My parents went pale. Austin looked like he had swallowed a lemon. "Ask them," I said, gesturing to my family. "Ask them about the credit cards. Ask them about the car lease. Or don't. You will see the evidence on Monday." "You are bluffing," Austin shouted, though his voice cracked. "You don't have anything." "I have everything," I said. "I have the bank records. I have the medical records. I have the witness testimony from the neighbors. And I have the recording of you 2 nights ago, sitting in my kitchen, talking about how you were going to sell the house for $1.6 million and move to Vegas." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. My father sank back into his chair, looking suddenly very old. "You bugged the house?" Austin whispered. "It is my house," I said. "I can put a recorder wherever I please, especially when I have intruders living in it." I looked at Barry Zuckerman. The lawyer was staring at his clients with a look of dawning horror. He realized, in that moment, that he had been lied to. He realized he was walking into a massacre. "I will see you in court," I said. "And bring your checkbook. Mr. Zuckerman, I have a feeling you are going to be sanctioned for filing a frivolous lawsuit." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their panic radiating behind me like heat from a fire. The fallout was immediate and vicious by the time I got back to my hotel. My phone was blowing up. Austin had taken to social media. He had posted a long, rambling video on TikTok, crying, actually squeezing out tears, about how his rich corporate sister was kicking their elderly parents onto the street. "She doesn't care about family," he wailed into the camera. "She only cares about money. We gave her everything, and now she is leaving us homeless." The video was getting traction. Comments were pouring in. "Wow, what a monster. Rich people are the worst. Hope she rots." My mother posted on Facebook a long status update about the pain of a mother's heart and the serpent you raise in your bosom. She tagged all our relatives. She tagged the church group. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, a stranger. Probably someone who saw Austin's video. I didn't answer. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room and opened my laptop. I logged into the secure portal for the Blackwood Superior Court. Eleanor had given me access to upload supplementary exhibits. I uploaded the file. Exhibit G, Audio recording. Conspiracy to defraud and sell. I uploaded the file. Exhibit H, credit report. Austin Thistledown/Ivy Thistledown. I uploaded the file. Exhibit 1, affidavit of Silas Thorne, forensic accountant. I sent the truth into the digital void, straight to the clerk's office, where it would be stamped and placed on Judge Hawthorne's desk first thing in the morning. Let them scream on the internet. Let them win the court of public opinion for 12 hours. The only opinion that mattered was the one that would be delivered from the bench. I turned off my phone. I took a hot shower. I ordered room service, a club sandwich, and a glass of wine, and put it on my emergency credit card. That night, for the first time since I saw the moving truck in my driveway, the knot of anxiety in my chest uncoiled. I lay in the hotel bed, listening to the hum of the city outside. I thought about the house on the hill. I thought about the stained glass window. I thought about the freedom that was waiting for me. My family thought they were fighting a scared little girl. They did not realize they had forged me in the fire of their own neglect. They had made me hard. They had made me sharp. And tomorrow, they were going to cut themselves on the edges they had sharpened. I closed my eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the righteous. The Superior Court of Blackwood County smelled of lemon floor polish and stale anxiety. It was a smell I knew well from my professional life. Sitting in zoning hearings for Sterling and Stone, but today, the scent turned my stomach. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, trying to mimic the stillness of a statue. Next to me, Eleanor Vance was arranging her files with the geometric precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. "Don't look at them," Eleanor murmured, not moving her lips. "Look at the judge. Look at me. They are ghosts." But I could feel them, across the aisle, at the plaintiff's table. My family sat like a grotesque tableau of aggrieved victimhood. My mother, Brenda, was wearing a cardigan I had never seen before, a drab, beige thing that made her look 10 years older and significantly poorer than she actually was. She was clutching a handkerchief, dabbing at dry eyes with the rhythmic consistency of a metronome. My father, Marcus, sat stiffly in his church suit, his jaw set in a line of righteous indignation. And Austin was wearing a suit that was clearly bought yesterday. The tag was probably still tucked into the collar. He was leaning back, chewing gum, looking around the courtroom as if he were waiting for a movie to start. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Percival Hawthorne swept into the room. The irony of his name was not lost on me. Hawthorne presiding over the fate of the Hawthorne. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. Gray hair, gray eyes, and a face that had likely not smiled since the Reagan administration. He sat down, adjusted his robes, and peered over his spectacles at the circus assembled before him. "Civil case number 492, the clerk announced. "Thistledown versus Thistledown." Judge Hawthorne sighed. It was a sound of profound weariness. "Proceed," he said. Barry Zuckerman, my parents' lawyer, stood up. He buttoned his shiny suit jacket and approached the bench. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of filial betrayal, a case of a daughter taking advantage of her elderly parents' trust and financial sacrifice." He called my mother to the stand first. Brenda Thistledown walked to the witness box as if she were walking to the gallows. She swore on the Bible, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Thistledown," Zuckerman asked softly, "can you tell the court about the arrangement you had with your daughter?" "We trusted her," my mother began, her voice cracking. She looked at the jury box, though there was no jury today, only the judge. "We are simple people. We don't understand banks and wire transfers. We saved every penny for 30 years, every birthday money, every tax refund. We put it in the safe. It was for Austin. He has had a hard time. We wanted him to have a home. And you gave this money to Ivy?" "Yes," she sobbed. $200,000, in cash, on November 15th. She came to dinner. She said, "Mom, let me handle the purchase. I know real estate." She promised on her grandmother's grave that she would put the house in Austin's name once the sale cleared. And now she says it is hers. She broke down into a fit of theatrical weeping that would have been impressive if I didn't know she used the same technique to get out of speeding tickets. I watched her, feeling a cold detachment. I remembered November 15th. I hadn't gone to dinner. I was in the hospital getting stitches because I had cut my hand on a model at work. I had the hospital bill to prove it, but Eleanor did not move. She let my mother cry. She let the performance drag on until it became uncomfortable. "Cross-examination?" the judge asked. Eleanor stood up. She did not approach the witness box. She stood behind her desk, tall and imposing. "Mrs. Thistledown," Eleanor said, "you say you gave my client cash on November 15th, 2025. What time was this dinner?" "Around 6 o'clock, my mother sniffled. "And you handed her a bag of cash? $200,000? That is a lot of volume. Was it in hundreds? 50s? "Hundreds," my mother said quickly. "In a grocery bag." "I see. And you have no receipt for this exchange?" "It was family. You don't ask your daughter for a receipt." "No further questions," Eleanor said. Sitting down, I looked at her, panicked. "That's it?" I thought, "You aren't going to ask about the hospital?" "Patience," Eleanor whispered. Next, it was Austin's turn. My brother swaggered to the stand. He winked at me as he passed. I felt a surge of nausea. "Mr. Thistledown," Zuckerman asked, "did you participate in the selection of the property known as the Hawthorne?" "Oh, yeah," Austin said, leaning into the microphone. "I found it. I was the one who scouted the location. I told Ivy. This is the one. I even did the initial walkthrough. I negotiated the price with the seller's agent. And did you contribute to the purchase?" "I put in my sweat equity." "Man," Austin said. "I mean, sir, Your Honor, I helped with the renovations. I was there every day, tearing up carpets, painting. Ivy just wrote the checks with our money. But I did the work. It is my house. She just stole the paperwork." "Thank you, Austin," Zuckerman beamed. Eleanor rose again. This time, she walked around the table. She moved closer to the witness stand. She held a notepad, but she didn't look at it. "Mr. Thistledown," Eleanor began, her voice pleasant. "You say you did the walkthrough and the renovations?" "Yes, ma'am. Every day." "Wonderful. It is a beautiful Victorian property. Can you tell the court what year the house was built?" Austin blinked. 1990? Or maybe 1985? "The house was built in 1892, Eleanor said dryly. "But perhaps you are not a history buff. Let us talk about the renovations you personally performed. You said you tore up the carpets?" "Yeah, dust everywhere. Brutal work." "What kind of wood is underneath the carpet in the living room?" "Mr. Thistledown, since you tore it up." Austin shifted in his seat. He looked at our father, then back at Eleanor. Wood? Like oak?" "Yeah, it is oak." "It is heart pine," Eleanor corrected. "Original heart pine." "Very distinctive, but maybe you missed that. You said you painted?" "Walls, ceilings, all of it." "What brand of paint did you use for the library?" "It is a very specific custom color." "Bear," Austin said confidently. "From Home Depot." "It is Farrow and Ball," Eleanor said. "Imported from England. $50 a can. We have the receipts. Did you buy the paint?" "Mr. Thistledown?" "I bought it. I just applied it." "I see. One last question. You mentioned you negotiated with the seller's agent. What was his name?" Austin froze. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Zuckerman, who was suddenly very busy studying his fingernails. "I forget. It was a guy? Dave? Maybe Mike?" "The seller's agent was a woman named Mrs. Higgins," Eleanor said, turning to the judge. "She is 80 years old." Austin's face turned a mottled shade of red. "Well, I talked to someone. Maybe it was her assistant." "Mrs. Higgins works alone," Eleanor said. "No further questions." Austin practically ran off the stand. He slumped into his chair, refusing to look at anyone. Judge Hawthorne was writing something in his notebook. He did not look happy. Finally, my father took the stand. Marcus Thistledown looked like a man trying to hold back a tidal wave with a spoon. He was sweating. Mr. Thistledown, Eleanor asked during her cross-examination, let us go back to this savings, $200,000. You say you saved this over 30 years? Yes, my father growled. I am a frugal man. And you kept it in a safe because you don't trust banks? That is correct. Banks are thieves. And yet, Eleanor picked up a piece of paper from her desk. In 2023, you refinanced your own home with First National Bank. You took out $150,000 in equity. Why did you use a bank for that, if you don't trust them? My father's eyes darted around the room. That was an emergency. What kind of emergency? Home repairs? The roof? Really? Because we have records here, subpoenaed records, showing that the money was wired immediately to an account called Crypto Kings and another transfer to Malta Bet 365. Did the roofer accept Bitcoin? Mr. Thistledown? The courtroom went silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop humming. I don't know what you're talking about. My father stammered. My account was hacked. I told the bank. You never filed a fraud report, Eleanor said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. And if you had $200,000 in a safe in 2025, as you claim, why did you need to refinance your home in 2023? Why pay interest to a bank when you had a fortune sitting in your bedroom? I wanted to keep the savings for Austin, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the rail. It was his inheritance. I couldn't touch it. So you went into debt, paid high interest, and risked your own home while sitting on a pile of cash? Eleanor asked. That does not sound like the behavior of a frugal man, Mr. Thistledown. It sounds like the behavior of a man who had no money left. I had the money, my father roared. He stood up. Don't you twist my words. She stole it. My daughter is a thief. She thinks she is better than us because she went to college. She looks down on us. Mr. Thistledown, sit down, Judge Hawthorne snapped. His voice was like a whip crack. She is a liar, my father continued, ignoring the judge, pointing a shaking finger at me. She promised me. She said, Dad, give me the money, and I will take care of Austin. She looked me in the eye and lied. I sat there, looking at him. I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. This man was not my father. He was an addict protecting his supplier. Austin was the drug, and I was just the wallet he had tried to pick. Mr. Zuckerman, Judge Hawthorne said, his voice ice cold. Control your client, or I will hold him in contempt. Zuckerman jumped up, grabbing my father's arm and practically dragging him back to the seat. Zuckerman was sweating profusely now. He was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief that was already soaked. He looked at Eleanor with fear in his eyes. He knew. He knew he had walked into a trap. Eleanor waited for the commotion to settle. She looked at the judge. She looked at the gallery. Then she looked at me and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Your Honor, Eleanor said, her voice ringing clear and calm through the chaotic energy of the room. The defense has listened to the plaintiff's stories. We have heard about invisible cash, imaginary conversations, and renovations that never happened. But the court deals in evidence, not fairy tales. She walked back to our table and picked up a small, black USB drive. We move to submit Exhibit G, Eleanor said. We believe this evidence will clarify the plaintiff's true intent regarding the property. It will also impeach the credibility of every word they have spoken today. Objection, Zuckerman shouted, standing up. We have not seen this evidence. This is trial by ambush. Mr. Zuckerman, the judge said, peering over his glasses. Ms. Vance filed this exhibit into the secure portal last night at 10 p.m. You received a notification. If you did not review it, that is a failure of your diligence, not hers. Zuckerman turned pale. He sank back into his chair. Proceed. Miss Vance, the judge said. Eleanor plugged the drive into the court's AV system. This, she said, is an audio recording taken inside the residence at 42 Blackwood Lane. 2 nights ago, the speakers are the plaintiffs, Marcus and Austin Thistledown. My father's eyes went wide. Austin stopped chewing his gum. Eleanor pressed play. The sound of static filled the room, followed by the clear, unmistakable voice of Austin. I can't wait to unload this dump. Then my father's voice. Keep your voice down. Why? Ivy is gone. I talked to that realtor guy. If we sell quickly, $1.5 million. The color drained from my mother's face. She looked like she was going to faint. Austin looked at the ceiling, as if looking for an escape hatch. My father stared at the table, his hands clenching and unclenching. The recording continued. She can build another house. Let her work. I am retired. Eleanor stopped the playback. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. They do not want a home, Your Honor, Eleanor said softly. They want a liquidation. They are not suing for family stability. They are suing to sell my client's property to pay off gambling debts. Judge Hawthorne looked at the plaintiffs. His expression was no longer just weary. It was disgusted. He looked like he was smelling something rotten. Mr. Zuckerman, the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. Do you have any explanation for this? Zuckerman stood up. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at his clients, who were now actively avoiding his gaze. I request a brief recess, Your Honor. Zuckerman stammered. Denied, Judge Hawthorne said. Sit down. The judge turned his gaze to me. For the first time, his eyes softened. Ms. Thistledown, he said, you have sat very quietly through some very loud accusations. Is there anything you wish to say before I render a verdict? Eleanor nudged me. Stand up, she whispered. I stood up. My legs felt steady. I looked at my parents. They wouldn't look at me. I looked at Austin. He was staring at his shoes. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear. They didn't sue me for the house. They sued me because I finally said no. That is my only crime. I sat down. The judge nodded. He picked up his gavel. He didn't need to deliberate. He didn't need to review the notes. He had seen enough clowns for one day. I am ready to rule, Judge Hawthorne said. My mother let out a whimper. My father closed his eyes. Austin started shaking his leg uncontrollably. The circus was over. The lion tamer was about to speak. Judge Hawthorne held the gavel suspended in the air, his eyes fixed on my father like a hawk eyeing a particularly slow field mouse. The courtroom was vibrating with the aftershocks of the audio recording Eleanor had just played. The one where my father and brother conspired to sell my sanctuary for cash. But Eleanor Vance was not a woman who believed in leaving an enemy wounded on the battlefield. She believed in total annihilation. Your Honor, Eleanor said, her voice slicing through the stunned silence, before you render your verdict, there is the matter of the plaintiff's core claim. They assert they gave my client $200,000 in cash. They claim this was their life savings. We have proven their intent was malicious, but now we must prove their claim is a mathematical impossibility. Proceed, the judge said, lowering the gavel but not banging it. He looked interested now. Eleanor signaled to the court clerk, and a new image appeared on the projection screen. It was a dense, complex spreadsheet, color-coded in angry reds and stark blacks. This, Eleanor announced, walking to the screen and using a laser pointer, is a forensic reconstruction of Marcus and Brenda Thistledown's finances for the last 10 years. We subpoenaed every bank account, every credit card, and every loan application associated with their Social Security numbers. She circled a column of red numbers in the year 2025. On November 15th, the day they claimed to have handed my client a grocery bag filled with $200,000, their combined checking account balance was $412.50. Their savings account had been closed 6 months prior with a negative balance. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. My mother gasped, clutching her chest as if she had been shot. Furthermore, Eleanor continued, her tempo increasing, hitting the facts like a boxer landing body blows. At the time of this alleged gift, the plaintiffs were carrying credit card debt totaling $45,000 across 7 different cards. They were also 3 months behind on their own mortgage payments. To suggest that these individuals were sitting on a pile of cash equivalent to a luxury car while drowning in high-interest debt is not just perjury. Your Honor, it is a fantasy that insults the intelligence of this court. My father stood up, his face purple. "We kept it at home, I told you. It was off the books." "Sit down," Judge Hawthorne roared. "If it was at home," Eleanor countered, her voice ice-cold, "then why did you apply for a payday loan of $500 on November 16th, the very next day? We have the application here. You listed your reason for the loan as groceries." She flashed the document on the screen. There it was, my father's signature on a predatory loan application, begging for $500 to buy food, 24 hours after he supposedly gave me a fortune. My father sank back into his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been pricked. The air was leaving him. The lie was dying. "Now," Eleanor said, turning to me, "let us look at the defendant's money." The screen changed. It showed my accounts. Clean, orderly. "Every dollar used to purchase the Hawthorne is accounted for here," Eleanor said. 70% from Ivy Thistledown's salary at Sterling and Stone, accumulated over 8 years of documented savings. 30% from the inheritance of Margaret Vance, deposited directly from the probate attorney's escrow account to Ms. Thistledown. There is no cash deposit. There is no mystery money. The money trail is pristine. Eleanor turned off the projector. The room felt darker, heavier. She walked back to our table and picked up a small remote control. "We have one final piece of audio evidence, Your Honor," she said. "The previous clip established the father's intent. This clip establishes the mother's complicity and the true destination of the funds they hope to extract from this lawsuit." My mother froze. She stopped crying. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Eleanor pressed the button. The audio was crisp. It was from the recording I had made in the kitchen, but a segment I had not listened to until Silas pointed it out. It was recorded while my father was in the bathroom and Austin and my mother were alone. Voice of Brenda Thistledown. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Voice of Austin. "Nah, Ivy is book smart, but she is life stupid. She thinks we actually want to live there." Voice of Brenda. "Good, because the loan shark called me again. Austin, he said if we don't pay the 50 grand by next month, he is going to break your legs. We need to sell that house the second the judge signs it over. We sell it cheap, pay off your gambling debt, and we still have plenty left over." Voice of Austin. "Don't worry, Mom. That stupid girl buys the house. We steal it, we sell it. It is the perfect flip. She basically worked for 10 years just to pay off my bookie." The silence that followed was different from before. It was not shocked. It was horrified. It was the kind of silence you hear when a monster takes off its mask. "That stupid girl," I whispered to myself, the words echoing in my head. The entire courtroom turned to look at the plaintiff's table. My mother was no longer the weeping, victimized elderly woman. She was stripped bare. She was a woman who had conspired to rob her daughter to save her son from the consequences of his own vices. "Gambling debts," Judge Hawthorne said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to the back of the room. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at my parents with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. "You filed a lawsuit in my court you swore under oath to facilitate a scheme to pay off illegal gambling debts?" "It is a lie," my mother shrieked, jumping up. "That is not my voice. It is AI. It is a deep fake. She is a witch." "Mrs. Thistledown," the judge said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Sit down before I have the bailiff shackle you to the chair." But I was not done. The house was safe. The money was safe. But Austin, the architect of this misery, was still sitting there, looking pale but technically free. I stood up. I picked up the thick file that Silas, my investigator, had compiled, The one with the credit report. Your Honor, I said. My voice did not shake. My lawyer has proven they have no claim to my house, but I have evidence to prove that this is not the first time Austin Thistledown has tried to steal my financial future. I walked to the witness stand, where Austin was still sitting, having never been formally dismissed, trapped in the spotlight of his own lies. I present Exhibit 1, I said, handing the file to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. This is a comprehensive credit history report for Ivy Thistledown. I turned to Austin. He looked at the file, and I saw the color drain from his face so completely he looked like a corpse. Austin, I said, loud enough for the back row to hear. Do you recognize the Visa card from First National Bank ending in 4599? The one opened in 2018? Austin stammered. How about the auto lease for a BMW in 2019, signed by Ivy Thistledown? I continued, stepping closer. I didn't sign those. Austin, I was in graduate school. I was riding the bus, but the bills went to your address. The default notices went to your email. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, this man used my Social Security number to open 5 fraudulent credit lines and a vehicle lease over the last 7 years. He racked up over $80,000 in debt in my name and let it default. He has been stealing my identity to fund the lifestyle he claims I refuse to support. Judge Hawthorne flipped through the file. He looked at the signatures on the credit applications. He looked at the fake IDs used. This is a felony, the judge said, looking at Austin. This is multiple felonies. Then, the chaos broke. Barry Zuckerman, the slick lawyer in the shiny suit, stood up so fast his chair fell over backward with a loud crash. He looked terrified. He realized he had been suborning perjury and was now in the middle of a criminal conspiracy case. Your Honor, Zuckerman shouted, waving his hands. I move to withdraw as counsel immediately. I had no knowledge of this. My clients assured me the funds were legitimate. They assured me the claim was valid. I cannot represent them. I am being lied to by my own clients. Granted, Judge Hawthorne said instantly. Get out of my sight. Mr. Zuckerman. Zuckerman grabbed his briefcase and practically sprinted down the aisle, leaving his clients alone at the table. My parents looked at the empty chair where their lawyer had been. Then they looked at each other. The alliance crumbled. You said she wouldn't check, my father screamed at my mother. You said she never checks her credit report. Me? My mother shrieked back, shoving him. It was your idea. You said we could use her credit because she has a good job. You said she owes us. It was Austin, my father yelled, pointing a shaking finger at his son. He made me do it. He said the crypto would pay it back. He lost the money. It is his fault. Shut up, old man, Austin shouted from the witness stand, standing up. You are the one who spent the retirement money. You are the one who couldn't say no to me. You are weak. Order! Judge Hawthorne banged his gavel. Bang, bang, bang. Order in this court. The bailiffs moved in, surrounding the plaintiff's table and the witness stand. My family was tearing itself apart, screaming accusations, revealing every ugly hidden truth they had kept buried for years. They were drowning, and in their panic, they were trying to climb on top of each other to breathe. I stood in the center of the storm. I was the eye of the hurricane. I watched them, the people who had raised me, the people I had spent my life trying to please, and I felt nothing but a cool, cleansing relief. I looked up at the judge. He was looking at me. He waited for the bailiffs to silence my screaming family. When the room was finally quiet, save for my mother's jagged breathing, the judge nodded to me. Ms. Thistledown, he said, do you have a final statement? I looked at my parents. My father was slumped over, head in his hands. My mother was staring at the floor, weeping real tears this time, tears of shame. Austin was looking at the bailiff's handcuffs with wide, terrified eyes. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I took a breath. It tasted like the air in the hawthorn after I had sanded away the rot. Clean. For 29 years, I thought my value to this family was measured in what I could give them, I said quietly. I thought if I was just good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would love me as much as they love him. I pointed at Austin. But I realized something today. They don't love him either. You don't enable someone you love to destroy themselves, and they don't hate me. They just see me as a resource, like a mine to be stripped, or a house to be sold. I placed my hand on the defense table. They did not sue me for the house, Your Honor. They sued me because for the first time in my life, I closed the bank of Ivy. They sued me because I dared to buy a lock for my door. They sued me because I escaped their control. This was never about property. It was about ownership. And I am here to say that I own myself. I sat down. Eleanor reached over and squeezed my hand. Her grip was iron, but her hand was warm. Judge Hawthorne looked at me for a long moment. Then he turned his gaze to the wreck of a family on the other side of the aisle. He picked up his pen. He didn't just write a verdict. He carved it. I have heard enough, the judge said. And frankly, I have heard too much. He adjusted his robes. The hammer was about to fall. Judge Hawthorne did not write his verdict. He spoke it, and his voice resonated through the courtroom with the weight of a stone tablet slamming into the earth. In my 30 years on the bench, Judge Hawthorne began, leaning forward, his gaze boring into my parents. I have seen divorces that turned violent. I have seen business partners stab each other in the back for a percentage point, but I have never, until this day, witnessed a display of parental greed so naked, so calculating, and so utterly devoid of moral compass as what I have seen in this courtroom. My mother shrank into her chair, her face flushing a deep, mottled crimson. My father stared at the table, his hands shaking violently. The plaintiff's claim for a constructive trust is denied, the judge announced. It is dismissed with prejudice. This court finds that Ivy Thistledown is the sole, legal, and rightful owner of the property known as the Hawthorne. There is no ambiguity. There is no debate. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a month. Eleanor squeezed my hand under the table. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice rising, I am issuing an immediate order of eviction, Mr. and Mrs. Thistledown and Mr. Austin Thistledown. You are hereby ordered to vacate the premises at 42 Blackwood Lane. You have exactly 2 hours to remove your personal effects. You will be escorted by the Sheriff's Department immediately following this hearing. If you are found on the property after 5 o'clock this afternoon, you will be arrested for trespassing. My father looked up, his eyes wide with panic. 2 hours? But where will we go? That is not the concern of this court, Judge Hawthorne snapped. Perhaps you can stay in the hotel room your daughter is currently paying for, although I suspect that hospitality has just expired. The judge picked up a stack of papers, the evidence Eleanor had submitted regarding the fake loan and the gambling debts. You came here claiming your daughter stole your life savings, Hawthorne said, shaking his head in disgust. Instead, the evidence shows that you have attempted to weaponize the legal system to extort a settlement from her to cover the illicit debts of your son. It is a mockery of this institution. Therefore, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendant's legal fees in their entirety, estimated at $40,000. In addition, I am awarding punitive damages to Ms. Thistledown in the amount of $50,000 for emotional distress and malicious prosecution. We don't have $50,000, my mother shrieked, standing up. We are broke. You saw the bank accounts. Then I suggest you start selling assets, the judge said cold. Because if you do not pay, I will garnish your pensions until the debt is satisfied. He turned his eyes to Austin. Austin was trying to make himself invisible, slouching so low he was almost under the table. As for you, Mr. Thistledown, the judge said, you seem to believe that laws are suggestions. You have committed perjury in my courtroom today. You have admitted on tape to a conspiracy to defraud, and based on the evidence provided by the defense regarding identity theft. The judge nodded to the bailiff. Officer, please take Mr. Thistledown into custody. Austin scrambled up, knocking his chair over. Wait, no, you can't. I didn't mean it. It was just a prank. Mom, Dad, do something. The bailiff, a man the size of a linebacker, did not listen to the excuses. He spun Austin around. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. Actually, Your Honor, the bailiff said, checking his computer terminal. We just ran his prints. There is an active warrant for an Austin Thistledown in Nevada. Check fraud. Outstanding since 2024. Excellent, Judge Hawthorne said. Add it to the list. Remand him to the county jail without bail pending the district attorney's review of the new identity theft charges. Mom! Austin screamed as he was dragged toward the side door. He looked like a child now, a terrified, spoiled child who had finally touched the hot stove he had been warned about. Mom, help me. Don't let them take me. My mother reached out, sobbing, but she was paralyzed. She watched her golden boy, the prince she had sacrificed her daughter to protect, being hauled away like a common criminal. Court is adjourned, Judge Hawthorne said. He banged the gavel one last time. Bang! The sound signaled the end of my previous life. I stood up. Eleanor Vance closed her briefcase with a satisfying snap. Good work, Ivy, she said. I will have the sheriff meet us at the house. Do you want to ride with me? No, I said. I will drive myself. I need a minute. I turned to leave. My parents were still sitting at the table, frozen in their humiliation. The few people in the gallery, local reporters, curious retirees, were whispering and pointing. My parents' faces were burning red, the shame finally penetrating their thick skin. My father looked up and saw me. He stood up, his legs shaky. He walked toward the bar, his hands clasped together. Ivy, he croaked. Ivy, please, you can't let them take your brother. You can't let us be homeless. We are your parents. I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me selfish for 20 years. I looked at the woman who had plotted to sell my home to pay a bookie. You have 2 hours, I said. My voice was not angry. It was just a fact. The clock started 3 minutes ago. Ivy, my mother wailed, rushing toward the railing. We have nowhere to go. It is going to rain tonight. How can you be so heartless? I learned from the best, I said. I turned my back on them. I walked down the aisle, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the floor. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom and stepped out into the hallway. The air outside the courtroom was cooler, fresher. I took a deep breath. I was an orphan now, in every way that mattered, and I had never felt lighter. I drove to the Hawthorne. The police were already there. 2 squad cars were parked in the driveway, lights flashing. A sheriff's deputy was standing on the porch, waiting. My parents' car pulled in 5 minutes later. They didn't park. They just stopped in the middle of the driveway. They got out. Looking small and defeated, the deputy met them. You have strictly 2 hours, he told them. Grab your essentials. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property. I didn't go inside. I didn't want to be in the same room with them ever again. Instead, I walked around to the side of the house and climbed the exterior stairs to the balcony off the master bedroom, the room Austin had claimed. I stood there, gripping the railing, watching the scene unfold below. It was pathetic, really. My father was dragging suitcases out to the car, stuffing them into the trunk. My mother was running back and forth with armfuls of clothes, still crying. They looked like scavengers being chased away from a kill. At one point, my father looked up. He saw me standing on the balcony. High above him, he stopped. He looked like he wanted to shout something, to curse me one last time. But the deputy took a step toward him, hand resting on his belt. My father looked down, defeated. He got back in the car. Exactly 1 hour and 50 minutes later, the trunk was slammed shut. The car was full. They hadn't taken everything. Austin's gaming setup was still inside, disassembled in a heap, but they had taken enough. The deputy walked over to the driver's side window. Go, he said, and don't come back. My father started the engine. The car backed out of the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. They drove down the hill, disappearing around the bend. They were gone. The deputy looked up at me and tipped his hat. "We will do a patrol later tonight. Ms. Thistledown, just to be safe." "Thank you, officer," I called down when the police cars left. The silence that fell over the hawthorn was absolute. It wasn't the heavy, ominous silence of the invasion. It was the silence of peace. It was the silence of a church after the service has ended. I walked back inside. The house was a mess. There were muddy footprints on the floors. There were empty pizza boxes in the kitchen. Austin's room smelled of stale body spray and energy drinks. But it didn't matter. Dirt could be cleaned. Smells could be aired out. The rot had been excised. I went to my bag and pulled out the new deadbolts I had bought at the hardware store on my way over. I spent the next hour changing every lock in the house. Front door, back door, French doors, even the basement door. With every screw I tightened, I felt a layer of trauma peeling away. I was sealing the fortress. When the last lock was clicked into place, I went to the kitchen. I scrubbed the counters. I threw away the trash. I opened every window in the house to let the breeze blow through, carrying the scent of pine and rain, pushing out the stale air of my family's greed. The sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the living room floor, the heart pine floor that I had restored, the floor Austin didn't even know the name of. I made a cup of tea. I used the kettle my grandmother had left me. I sat in the velvet armchair, the one Austin had put his dirty feet on. I had flipped the cushion over. It was clean now. I sat there, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight. I took a sip of the hot tea. It warmed me from the inside out. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I looked at it. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken years ago. A picture of my mother and me at my college graduation. She was smiling, but looking closely now, I could see the tightness in her jaw, the calculation in her eyes. Incoming call. "Mom." I let it ring. Buzz, buzz, buzz. She was probably calling to beg, or maybe to scream, or maybe to tell me that Dad was having a heart attack. Another lie to pull me back in. She wanted to know if the bridge was truly burned, or if there was still a singular plank she could cross to get back to my wallet. I picked up the phone. I didn't answer it. I used the small metal tool to pop the SIM card tray open. The little chip fell into my palm. I walked to the kitchen trash can. I snapped the plastic chip in half. It made a tiny, insignificant sound. Snap. I dropped the pieces into the garbage, right on top of a slice of cold pizza Austin had left behind. Then, I took the phone itself. It was the only way they knew how to reach me. I walked to the drawer where I kept my tools. I dropped the phone inside and closed the drawer. I would buy a new one tomorrow. New number, new carrier, new life. I walked back to the living room and sat down. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the room was filling with a soft, twilight blue. I was alone, for the first time in 29 years. Being alone didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a victory. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the floors I had sanded, the home I had fought for. "I am Ivy Thistledown," I whispered to the empty room. "And this is my house." No one answered. No one demanded anything. No one told me I was selfish. The silence was beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed watching Justice Be Served, please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with you. Please subscribe to the channel Sunday Drama Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to know that it is okay to cut toxic family out of your life.